of Britain's intention to leave the EU after more than 40 years of membership. While it will be 2 more years before Britain officially leaves the EU, there is plenty of scope for unofficial negotiations before that deadline.
Georgina Downer is an adjunct fellow at the Institute of Public Affairs and a former diplomat. To discuss this, she joins us now from Melbourne. Georgina, welcome.
Good morning.
I noticed overnight the European Council President, Donald Tusk, has essentially said they will not conduct any talks with Britain regarding trade while this is going on. He says it's far too premature. Does this perhaps present some opportunities for Australia?
Well, that's a difficult issue there. What he's talking about is whether Britain and the EU negotiate in tandem an FTA and this sort of divorce settlement where Britain will have to pay a very large amount of money to exit out of its EU arrangements. So for Australia, we can't really formally negotiate an FTA until Britain is out, which will be probably in 2 years, in 2019. But of course we should be having informal negotiations, and I expect they are ongoing at the moment. There's no point waiting until 2019 and then negotiating an FTA, because if we want to do a quick deal, which I think will be very much in our interest and Britain's interest, we should have some preliminary negotiations now.
Do you feel as though this is essentially a winding back of the clock to a time when certainly Australia and Britain had very close economic ties?
Well, you could look at it that way, but no, I think it's absolutely a new chapter for Britain and for Australia's relations with Britain. You're right that prior to 1973, when the UK entered the European Economic Community, as the EU then was, we had an extremely close and preferential trading relationship with the UK. And as soon as the UK entered the EEC, we were basically cut off. So we'll certainly see with an FTA with the UK, I think a lot more in terms of agricultural trade and hopefully recognition of professional qualifications and better treatment of our professionals who want to go over there and live and work, but that's definitely a new chapter. And of course, Australia didn't just sit back in 1973 and say, "Oh, we're terribly damaged and there's nothing to do about it." We actually took the opportunity to explore new markets and did very well. Markets in Asia and North America, of course, being the main ones.
It would appear, given Brexit and also, of course, the election of Donald Trump, that people are disillusioned with multilateralism. Is the answer aggressive unilateralism? That's certainly been presented by some people to say this is the way forward and this is how countries will conduct their business as far as trade links are concerned.
Look, I think there's two issues there. One, there is certainly a disappointment with multilateral bodies trying to run our countries. So this sort of sense that we elect politicians to represent us in Parliament and they're the ones who are supposed to pass the laws that apply to us wasn't the case in the EU. In the EU, you have that system, but then you also have the EU system, which imposes laws from Brussels and basically laws crafted by bureaucrats. In terms of the multilateral trading system, though, best case scenario are multilateral deals, are WTO deals. But the reality is, over time, as the multilateral trading system has broadened out to include more participants, it's become harder and harder to get deals. And so, I mean, Australia's experience is a very good case in point, where we have been able to do multilateral or plurilateral deals, like with ASEAN, we have. But where we haven't, we've done the bilateral deals. So great deals with the United States, with China, with Japan, with Korea.
But on that point, I mean, do you feel as though, you mentioned the WTO there, do you feel as though that is being undermined and perhaps will continue to be so, where it will eventually become irrelevant?
It's not irrelevant, but the the Doha round of negotiations that began a couple of decades ago now has just stalled and stalled and stalled. So what do you expect your trade negotiators to do? To plug away forevermore but never have any progress and not do anything on the bilateral or plurilateral levels, or to be experimental and try new things. So the WTO will still keep chugging along, but we would expect, and we do have trade negotiators here in Australia, and I would expect in the UK, who will do bilateral deals where there are opportunities to do that, and where it makes sense.
So what would that mean in real terms for Australians if a deal like that was struck?
So it's of course difficult to tell, because it will depend on the deal that the UK does with the EU. But I would expect we'd see good market access opening up for agricultural exports, especially meat, so beef and lamb. Also our horticulture, so fruit and vegetables. We have very big difficulties getting in some of our meat into the EU, because you've got to remember, so the UK as a member of the EU it's free to trade within the EU, but outside the EU it's a protectionist bloc. So once the UK is out, it will be able to determine the terms on which it receives our exports, and we would expect very, very positive treatment in terms of low, if not no, tariff barriers there. We import manufactured goods from the UK, so our consumers here in Australia, which is of course the vast majority of us, we should see, say, cheaper British cars and manufactured items that will go into more advanced manufacturing. And then I think for most people, though, the very attractive offering, of course, given our economy is such a service-based economy these days, is whether we get good recognition of professional qualifications for accountants, lawyers, and the like. So that's always difficult. But there's an issue over the last 10 years where we've seen a decline in Australians being able to live and work in Britain as the UK has tightened the restrictions for non-EU migrants. And when we would hope that an FTA would try and rectify that, so we have a much easier treatment, fairer treatment for our nationals going over there to live and work.